Well, it's been a little bit of a while since we've had a debate or conversation with anybody. I've tried to do this many times, and often people are just they're a little bit shy about it, or they assume bad faith, which is understandable. Politics online has gotten very toxic these days and very bad faith. But I am trying to do my best to get people who disagree with me to come on stream to talk about those disagreements, because even if it doesn't become a heated debate, I mean, in this era, right now, that is some unique content to find. So, somebody watched my video on Femcels recently and took issue with some of the things I said there. Now, I don't know whether or not this person identifies as or is a femcel or anything. I think they might be a Radfem, but I don't want to speak for them. So, we're going to have a conversation and see how it goes, see if we can find common ground.
Okay. I'm like fully ready now. Let me like ping my friends, like tell her I'm on here.
All good?
Okay. Do you just want to get into it?
Yeah, if you have any like particular things that I said that you take issue with, we could start there.
Sure. I had like a list of things. I had two things I agreed with. And I think like four things or five, like a list of like five different things. That like I thought I disagreed with. Um, I guess I'll like introduce myself first. You can call me like Jackie, I guess. I'd consider myself like a radical feminist. So what I radical in the sense of like it gets to like the root, not necessarily like a political radical, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I sort of and then to me what that this means is like I want to advance women's interests, particularly by like dismantling oh, my friend's watching now. Yeah, particularly by dismantling certain, I guess, like aspects of patriarchy. Um, and then I can get more into that later. So there was like two things I sort of agreed on about the video. Mostly, I think that like the examples in the video that were in TikTok, I thought they were being kind of
A
like
bit cherry
weirdly
picked.
male. Yeah, I thought well, yeah, a bit of that, but I think anybody
Yeah.
who like goes on Tik I think anyone who goes on TikTok to post about this is gonna be like that. Um, I think
Yeah.
that like, these are people that are always gonna be like male centered, if they're going on TikTok to like talk about how they're like avoiding men. Um, despite the fact, and then also I felt like they came off like a bit cringe and performative. Um, so there's like five different, I guess, pieces that I kind of disagreed with. Um, generally conflating like all radical feminists with specifically like it's not even that I necessarily like disagree with like misandress, but I think it's like incorrect to like conflate just like any like rad femme with like any misandressed. And also the idea that like these guys aren't like rad femmes aren't feminists like inherently. I don't think this was like argued in the video. It was just kind of taken as like a fact. There was like sort of like another sort of bit you went into, particularly that these guys or that the people who sort of like pushed this viewpoint were mostly like lesbians. Which I don't think the people in the video were like giant like attracted to women. They came off
Oh yeah,
very
a lot of
straight
the
to me.
people in those videos were came off,
Yeah,
yeah, straight for sure.
yeah. I sort of didn't get that at all.
Hmm.
Yeah, I also disagreed with the idea that like any sort of um like woman who like wants to like minimize contact with men. I sort of disagree with the idea that this is like inherently bad. Um, for for the people sort of women's interests, and then also sort of like it's like inherently like toxic or bad. I understand how it can be made that way, but it sort of like felt like, oh, these are like wig towel. and they're just like these like MGTOW people. I sort of disagree with that too. And then sort of the idea that this like is a viewpoint that comes about because of like a lack of like sexual access to the preferred sex. I think that a lot of I think that like a lot of these types of viewpoints can arise just because you're like evaluating your self-interest, you're evaluating how like men interact with you in the world, and sort of like based on this, like based on the behavior that the preferred sex or that like men sort of engage in. That's
We can
like
like
if
dive deeper
a
into each point individually if you want.
sure. I was gonna ask you which one you sort of wanted to like talk about first.
Yeah. Okay, so let
There's
me think
another
for a
one.
moment.
There's
Let's
another one, like a
Oh yeah,
fifth
list your
one.
final one. Yeah, yeah, let's
Sure.
go with your final one
The
quick.
oh, like these people are like racist, homophobic, transphobic. That this I don't. Yeah, you kind of mentioned that at the beginning of the video. Um,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair
So
enough. Okay, so yeah, let's start with. I guess we'll take it from the bottom, just because that's what's like fresh in my mind right now.
sure.
So in regards to bigotry that exists within certain Radfem sects, I will say that I'm glad you bring this up because I try to avoid doing this, and you caught me doing it, and that's
Mhm,
putting groups into categories a little too broadly and too readily. It's a good
mhm,
chance that not, maybe not even a significant amount of Radfems are transphobic or racist. But I will say
mhm,
that in my experience, because we don't really have data to pull on this, at least I don't believe we do. If we have some, I'd love
mhm.
to see it. In my experience, most Radfem communities have been occupied by TERFs, and I've watched as
Um,
like the feminist rhetoric has been weaponized by bigoted people like J.K. Rowling to argue that certain marginalized groups put women in danger by asking to be respected and to be validated.
right. Um, I okay. I won't even necessarily disagree with. I think there's probably merit to the like transphobia, but I think that like a lot of the like the things people will call like will point to as like this is like a turf. The acronym does say radical feminist, but I think most of the people who are like predominantly like into these talking points are going to be like they're conservatives, and then other people call them turfs because this is the like acronym that exists, if that makes sense.
That's fair. Then again, though, some of them are proud of that label. It's kind of like
Sure.
chud or incel, where it started out as like very clearly derisive and insulting, but now it's
Sure.
kind of been reclaimed almost. So obviously, you're right about me doing a quite a bit too much of lumping together of radfems.
Right.
Granted, I haven't had that many conversations with radfems. That's partially why I was so
Right.
excited for this one.
Mhm.
So yeah, thank you for clarifying on that one.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
oh,
I won't
sorry.
say that I'm like absent like certain like viewpoints. I wouldn't call myself like anti like I wouldn't like say that I am like anti-trans or whatever. But like I do think that like certain like advocacy around like sex-based interests. I'm not like necessarily saying that like trans women should be like excluded from women's spaces. But I do think that there should be like some like I think a feminist movement should be like focused around um I think a feminist movement should be focused around with the interests of natal women. If
The
that
double
makes
X
sense.
chromosome. Well, I guess not even the double X chromosome because there are exceptions with the with intersex. But yeah, I know
Sure.
what you mean.
Mhm.
So this is kind of one of the areas where I have a bit of disagreement. I identify as sort of an intersectional feminist. I believe that
Sure.
there's essentially this group, this ideological group that has been the villains throughout history, and that is
Mhm.
the wealthy, rich, and powerful elite men,
Mhm.
generally white in more modern history, because we've got this made up notion of race that we've applied
Sure.
superiority to white people. And like you can follow the line of history back and see it's the same people who are against women's liberation, black liberation, gay liberation, trans liberation, and the fact that this same blob of evil, for lack of a better term, is opposed to women's rights and all these different groups, it's like I worry about any desire to make exclusive advocacy. It's why I'm so big on intersectionality and the idea that, like, I identify as a progressive feminist, an intersectional progressive, you know what I mean?
Um, sure, I guess I understand where you're coming from. I feel like it can be a bit reductionist at times. I guess I'll go into like my viewpoint. I think society is filled with like different kinds of like classes in society. What I mean by that is you have like a class of like men's interests, you have a class of like women's interests, and like all these different like groups of people. And then they sort of all like come into contact with each other. So like men have their own interests, like white people have their own interests, black people have their own interests, and sort of like there are sections of society where like I'd even say like like there are ways in which like men have leverage over women and there are like interests that they want and there are like ways that women have leverage over men, and that they have their own interests, and I think the way that these two things interact create like what you would call like systems of oppression. I think the reason we have like a patriarchy, is like as like it would be put, is because like men specifically are like advantaged. I wouldn't disagree with the idea that like women are like have like certain points of leverage over men. I just think like this isn't like the like vector of advocacy that I really go for. And I also I also think that like women's, I guess, interests are like not as well advocated for society, just because of the way things have been built like historically. And I think if you go all the way back to the beginning, you might like see something for like strength differences. um
Mhm.
like I think the reason we like think conceptualize things in terms of like this big blob is just because different like progressive groups tend to organize with each other. I think you could like conceptualize another society, and I'm pretty sure you could also like come to places in history, where like minority groups might be like oppositional to each other.
Yeah, so one of the things that stood out to me there, there's a lot to touch on with that, is the idea of different groups having different interests. There's a lot of ways to interpret that, but I guess the way I'll interpret it the most charitably, but you can clarify, is that like um, different interests have been forced on different groups by society, by constructed systems. Would you agree
uh
that that's what you meant?
no, because like I'd say it's more like based than that. Like if I'm like well, I think the way that things have been structured puts different interests in the hands of different groups. So if I were to be like a Marxist or whatever, like I talk about, I wouldn't consider myself like a mark like a I guess like a leftist. Like if I were to, like I talk about like the proletariat have like the interests of like extracting capital, and like the bourgeois have the interests of like sorry, the proletariat have the interests of like maximizing the value of their like productive capital, and like the bourgeois have the interests in maximizing their like extractive potential. Like these are things that like materially benefit them. Like you could I do think like you can argue that like different like there is certain things that are imposed that like shape these. I would agree to that.
Sure. Yeah. So this is one thing that kind of worries me, like separatist ideologies, and I imagine we're going to get to that in a moment, which is a little bit of what I'm picking up on from this idea, is this idea that there are interests that are unique to groups, and those groups seeking these interests is fine. It's a little bit it just worries me, you know, because my ideal future, I guess, and maybe my ideal future is
Mhm.
not the right one, but is that we are eventually able to tear down the artificially constructed, arbitrarily placed social barriers between different groups. Like one of the biggest issues I see in our society right now is how bad the disconnect between men and women is. Like I feel like it feeds
Sure.
so much of the incel shit and the propaganda and Trump's rise and all that. And it's just
Mhm.
I feel like conversations like this are kind of the exact thing we need more of. I worry about separatism, you know?
Sure. I wouldn't mm, I wouldn't call myself a separatist, and I don't think it's politically viable, if that makes sense. Um, Personally, I don't really deal in like ideal futures, if that makes sense. Like in my mind, like I'm like a woman. I believe in like, or I have like certain like ways I interact with society. And there are certain like things that I want to get out of advocacy that I think will like benefit like me and people I care about. Like I think dealing in sort of I like dealing in idealized futures isn't like a thing that I like, it's not something I really conceptualize, if that makes sense. And it's
That's
I
oh
think
sorry.
it sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's fair. This actually brings it around to another point that I forgot to touch on earlier that you brought up, is the idea. Sorry, I'm a little blanked because I just got chased by a scarab. Those guys are mean. It's the idea that men and women have these different interests that
Mhm.
I'm a little hung up on, right? So
Sure.
when we talk about interests, right? It's very subjective, you know. Like there's definitely a very subjective, like case by case basis thing to this. I don't necessarily think I have the authority to say, oh, you should or shouldn't engage in
I
separatism as an individual. Or
mhm.
sorry, yeah. Here, let me just finish this one point. Um, but yeah, sorry. I don't mind anybody engaging in separatism as an individual. That's why I'm
Mhm.
I'm less so like harsh on the people in that video, and I kind of just criticize their individual points, less so than their
Sure.
life decisions. It's
Yeah.
more so the ideological movement, and I know you don't consider yourself an ideologue. For you, it's more like you are subjected to this patriarchal system, and out of a sort of desire just to see a better future or a better life for yourself, just a way to live your life in a way
Well,
that's,
me and
I don't
people
know.
I care about, I'd make
Yeah.
like if I was purely considering myself, I think I'd make uh slightly different choices.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the movement, I mean, I'm much more of like, I guess you'd call me an ideologue, I guess. I mean, I have like very strongly held beliefs at this point. I mean, not held
Mhm.
just for the sake of it. Like I've done quite a bit of research. I've arrived at these positions. It seems like the
Mhm.
patriarchy is it seems like it enforces you know, you mentioned before that some women have leverage in the patriarchy. I actually
But
disagree.
specifically
I
women as a class do. And I can expand on that if you want.
Yeah, I guess I'll give my take first, and I'll let you give your take. So, like, when it comes to my opinion on the idea of privilege and the patriarchy, um, for like women having leverage in it, it feels more like a smokescreen. Like if
Yeah,
you can give the lens of like a comfortable, like there's this term called MRS degree. Do you know that phrase?
I do not.
So like there's this idea, it's a kind of an old school term that like you would specifically like train your daughter to go to like a really good college specifically to spend all her time in the library and find like the highest performing, like gonna be a super surgeon doctor guy one day and marry him. Like that's the idea of like the MRS degree. And so
Is this
there's
like
this
a manosphere term?
no, it's like old like 1970s
I see.
like housewife,
Mrs.
like
degree,
house
right?
father type shit. Yeah, it's like
Is
boomer.
this Mrs. degree? MRS, Mrs.
Yeah, like becoming a wife. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So there's
see.
this idea of like, oh yeah, you know, you got to get that MRS degree, find like the highest, uh, you know, like a guy who's likely to have a very bright future and marry him, right? And on its face, that
Mhm.
almost sounds empowering. And at the time, I think there was an air of empowerment to that. But I look back at that and I think, what a smokescreen to convince a lot of women not to be not complacent. You know what I mean? Like, I worry about stuff like that where it's like, does the patriarchy really give women leverage, or is it the patriarchy pretending to give women leverage while it tortures both men and women, but really, really just tries to keep women in this like subservient, like what's the word for it? Helpless state as a group. You know what I mean?
I Yeah, I just want to clarify. I said that women have like certain leverage in society. But I don't think that this necessarily comes from patriarchy, if that makes sense.
Um, like,
Like,
yeah, I guess I'll let you expand on that.
sure. I think this is like a scale to me. So like if we go back like 100 years or like to if we go back to like Christian like medieval Europe, like I could I don't like assuming or making certain assumptions. This could be considered like the lowest point of like women's like leverage, and every like there are still certain things. I think that women like utilize certain social institutions to coerce and like men's sexuality, and I think certain like family regulation, like specific things like that. And like if we look at sort of like now, like legally at least, there are like certain things where like women have a lot more leverage, in terms of like equal like rights and everything. And they're sort of able to utilize like certain like sex um like sexually like selective, like they're able to be more like sexually selective, if that makes sense. And, like these are different like institutions which like give different like mechanisms by which like women can like impact society. And this
It's
is on a sliding scale.
Yeah, I definitely get you. To an extent, it's
I,
interesting. I have a lot of thoughts in this realm. Oh, sorry, you have something else?
I didn't I yeah, I remember, like I think this is the same for men too. Like if you look back like in the 50s, men had like a coercive power with income. And now it's sort of like less direct, um and more like cultural. Sorry.
Yeah, so like a big part of as we were talking about before, like the leverage that men have held with their income in the
Mhm.
past because women before couldn't work and, eventually were just like not encouraged to as much. There were just social factors that led to it taking a little bit for that to change. Now it's really changed. And I think that's what kind of facilitates the idea of a lot more of like the Radfem separatist aspect of the ideology,
Mhm.
or the belief system, or I don't know what you want to call it, the worldview.
Sure.
Um, I think a lot of it's because, like, yeah, we have dismantled some of the structure of the patriarchy enough that it's possible for women to achieve, like, without too without as much pushback as in the past, to achieve the same things
Right.
that men have done without without anyone batting an eye, right? So
Mhm.
that's definitely like a factor there, but I worry that like
Yeah.
we're in this era that feels very regressive. Like I don't know, everywhere I look I'm seeing Nazis, I'm seeing like gender war stuff about like incels hating women, and like some women seeming to really hate men, and it's like, oh no. And in my experience,
Mhm.
like I at one point was kind of a chuddy little like teenage 17-year-old loser, and
Mhm.
what really changed it was the fact that I just became friends with a lot more women, and I realized that women are people, and it just completely rinsed all this like essentialist worldview out of my mind. And I
Sure.
worry at how prevalent that mindset is in some people. You know what I mean?
Um, I It's weird. In my mind, I don't like see an incel and think that they're like wrong about something. I think that they correctly like evaluate their self-interest. Um, if that makes sense.
I don't know, because this is actually where we might disagree. This is an interesting one. Okay, no, this is exciting. Okay, so, I'm curious about this. My view on incels, as someone who I wouldn't have called myself an incel at the time, but I probably would call myself my old self an incel when I was a teenager
Yeah.
now, as an insult. What do you mean
Yeah.
when you say incel? I guess I should clarify because
Specifically somebody, who's, like, deprived of, like, sexual access to women, and they're sort of, like they have this sort of, like, view that, like, they're, like, left out, um, and, like, they have, like, certain, like, fantasies about taking action, in order to, like, secure that for, like, themselves and, like, also in other incels.
Mhm. So in my
Um
experience, sorry,
Mhm.
sorry, sorry. I was
Yeah,
just gonna say.
that
So
was
I agree with that
yeah,
definition. I also do kind of include a little bit of political ideology into it. Like, I
I
don't
would
think
too.
someone's an incel just because they're having trouble getting laid, but if they've let that
I
fact
do too.
affect them strongly and it's become like the forefront of their mind, that's when I think they've
Mhm.
entered like incelville. You know what I mean?
I'd say it has to be tied to, like, belief that, like, I am this way because, like, I'm deficient in something, um,
Sure, yeah.
and, like, society has or either I like, society has to be, like, able to accommodate this deficiency in order for me to, like, have, sexual access to women.
Yeah, so what really put a damper on my incel thoughts when I was younger
Mhm,
was obviously having more friends that were women. But from there, there's this effect that at least I and many other guys of experience have had when, say, playing a competitive game like Fortnite. Getting your first win in
mhm,
Fortnite takes like 100 games. It's like you're so nervous when you're in the top 10 every time that you fumble like constantly. And then when you finally get your first win, all of a sudden your next win, your third win, your fourth win, they all just come in right afterwards because you realized it's not that serious. It's not this like game-changing thing. You don't need to be so nervous. You don't need
right.
to put so much weight behind it. For incel guys, so many of them have had so little even casual conversation interactions with women, primarily because outside of school, being compelled or work, being compelled to talk to anyone, much less like if you're a guy, a girl, or if you're a girl, a guy, there's just not a lot of environments where men in particular are encouraged to do that. Like men are kind of not encouraged to go spend time at the mall, right? They're encouraged to go do hobbies that are either loner hobbies or you're doing it with other dudes, sports team type shit, right? So you
Yeah.
just end up having this society of men that, and this has been ongoing for a while, that are so disconnected from women and their experiences. One of my biggest frustrations is how many men believe that, just for the sake of example, believe that like false allegations of sexual assault or rape are a serious, huge issue they need to live their life around. And it's like, do you have any idea how
Yeah.
much more common sexual assault and rape is against women? Like, how can you not empathize with women on the risk of sexual assault while you're infinitely more worried about something infinitely more rare, right? And so the
Yeah.
lack of communication is a big part of it. And then there's the fact that, at least in my experience, becoming friends with women and seeing them as people led pretty quickly to me getting my first girlfriend and losing my virginity after that. And I mean, I have not dealt with incel thoughts since. So I do feel like a lot of
Yeah.
it's isolation. Like these guys need to make friends with women. And I think that when it comes to the femcels, they need to find dudes who aren't like fuckboys to become friends with.
Sure. Um does this not necessarily, like, agree with me if I'm saying that, like, an incel is, like, correctly evaluating their
I,
interests, and, like, I'm saying an incel is who they are because they have some sort of deficiency, and if we, like
I
if they go out, um, and if they go out and they sort of, like, uh make get more like contact with women and sort of gather more information, is this not like like recovery, like addressing some deficiency that they have?
So I don't really think of it as a deficiency. I think it's kind of a toxic mindset and it's kind of it's a little bit like body image iffy, I guess I would say. Like, there's nothing wrong with identifying like something you would like to improve about your appearance, or maybe your
Mhm.
personality, things like that. Like wanting to do a fitness transformation is fine, but like it's the mindset that your looks are the thing holding you back. Like there are very rare cases where there's very few cases where your looks are absolutely holding you back from finding love. Like it might make it a little bit harder, but I mean,
I've never talked about looks, and I've
yeah.
sorry. I just
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah. I mean the
Um,
thought that they're deficient in some way, like I guess they could
mhm.
be deficient in friendships with women. I guess would be like a way I could agree,
Like
but
understanding and empathy, with like the opposite sex.
okay, yeah, they're deficient in empathy for sure. I'll agree with that. As for like
Sure.
the idea that they're promoting their own interests, what the hell just killed me? A fence stalker? Damn. As for the idea that they're
Mhm.
promoting their own interests, I don't I don't necessarily agree because I feel like the incel does not understand his own interests. He thinks he does and he doesn't. Um, that's kind of how I see
Um,
things. This idea that like sex with women is gonna make them happy. It's not true. Typically, for these guys, like I mean, I don't know if you followed a lot of like ex incel stories, but I certainly have. A lot of them just
mhm.
realized after become like what came first was them not being an incel anymore before they lost their virginity or got their first girlfriend. Like the loss of the incel mindset is what set them free. And a
Yeah.
lot of it is the fact that like they place way too much value or way too much stock in the idea of having sex or having a girlfriend when step 1 is get some girl space friends, you know what I mean? And so many of them have like I don't know. It might. I think it would genuinely shock you if you saw how many like Gen Z men have spoken outside of a professional context to women for more than like a sentence, like like less
I
than
think it's
50
probably
times.
very low. Yeah.
It's
Um,
yeah.
I do want to come back to this. You said something earlier about fems on your like femcel point. They need to like make more like male friends who aren't fuckboys. My friend said something, and I do also have like my own sort of like experience that like corroborates this. But like if like the making like positive male friendships are very hard, because she says like in her experience, and then I can sort of like I also have like experiences like this. It is like difficult to meet men who aren't trying to like have sex with you and don't carry like misogynistic outlooks, that make you like that make them like off-putting or like unacceptable to be spending your time around. um like how like would there be like a gap to bridge
So
in that
that's
like
actually
environment?
I'm really glad you bring this up because it's not trying to imply anything, but it's similar to what I hear incels say because a lot of them don't trust women. I've heard this very common sentiment lately that women think that every average mid guy is like secretly a monster and is deserving of the hate they have for them. You know, it's like this screed about like a pity party they like to throw. It's mostly been in response to obsession, which is fantastic, by the way.
I haven't
Um,
seen that movie yet,
I
but
won't spoil. I won't spoil. Don't worry. Um, but I've seen this mindset a lot lately, and it's this idea that these guys are secretly like hated or that they're overtly hated just because they're nice guys. They're nice average guys, um,
mhm,
and that mindset very much is similar to what you're describing here of like how do I know I can trust this guy that he just wants to be friends with me and he's not like some fuck boy. um how do I know that this girl is not going to lie about me or something? You hear this a lot from incels, right? i I get where
sure.
you're coming from. My motto lately has been that like women are just men with less muscles. You know, like at the end of the day, you really never know who you can trust. I'm sure there have been many women that you've befriended throughout your life that have betrayed you, who you thought you could be vulnerable with, and then something happened and they were like, oh, I got you. Something like that, right? It's not really a
Yeah.
men woman thing. It's just, I guess men have a very unique ability to exert physical threat a physical threat upon you
Sure.
that I guess other women necessarily wouldn't, but there is still that
Well,
equal
also
danger of like,
most men I interact with are probably like gynophilic. I are probably like gynophilic. Most like women interact with probably aren't. Like, um, you when you, if you like in it is like how do I say this? It is like true. Like most like men will like go out and they will every most like women are um like available to them if that makes sense. Um, and they will like act that way until like a lot of the time. Like in in like um I am to the point so in my the male friends I have are mostly people who are dating my friends. Um so I have like and I also don't think I'm like I like come off in a way that isn't very like I guess like attractive to them. But like for like my other friends, it's like a lot. It's like like the men that like people do come into contact with, and like people try to like make male friends. It is like hard to like meet people who don't have like overtly like misogynistic or like outlooks or aren't trying to like hit on them.
that's very real, for sure. Like
Mhm.
it's hard for me to fully like understand it because I'm not a woman. I've
Mhm.
not felt what it's like to
Sure.
get hit on everywhere I go. But I mean, I can kind of have an idea of what it's like. So
Mhm.
I guess I don't really know what advice to give. It's just how it goes, you know? It's just kind of life, you know?
Yeah.
People
Well,
are
I'm
not
not saying
trustworthy
like
and
advice.
you know,
Sure.
sorry.
I'm not saying it's like advice. It's just like how do you like if it's like hard to construct a world, if it's like if the solution to like constructing the like a world where sort of like these things aren't in like or sort of like we're able to like find collaborate and find like solutions to problem. If the solution to this is to like on the like women's side, like make like male friends, like quality male friends, but like these people are like hard to find. This isn't really like a realistic solution.
Well, that's part of the problem is, man, I don't know what the solution is. Well, I know what the
Mhm.
solution is, but I don't know what the solution to get to the solution is. Like
Sure.
we know that like bridging the gap between men and women and creating an ability to fully understand each other's experiences is important. Like I do want to bring it back around eventually to this is the trans stuff. Like trans
Uh-huh.
women and trans men, for instance, oftentimes talk about how interesting living as the opposite sex has been for them. That
Mhm.
like their experience has been very interesting to get that like Freaky Friday kind of swap experience, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And I guess it's interesting that we really aren't as different in our interests at the end of the day. The perception, like men being these like, I guess I'll just like cut to the chase. There's this perception that men are like sex hungry beasts. This is a largely
Mhm.
trained into like men idea, like this constant desire for sex or for sexual conquest or whatever. Like it's not really natural. Notoriously,
Um,
I'm not trying to like talk myself up here, but notoriously, like growing up, I would be in the car
mhm.
and I'd like hear my uncles talking about women. I'd be like, come on, man, like really? Like Jesus Christ, like
Yeah.
Jesus, calm down, guys. And I was like 11 or 12 years old, right? So in a lot of ways, just that line of thought isn't natural. It's like that just gets trained into you. That just kind of you get immersed in it as a man, and you're expected. Like if you get like iffy around that kind of conversation as a young man, like as a little boy, you get like your uncles and your like older like male friends and stuff are like, oh, what are you, some kind of pansy? Yeah, yeah. They'll kind of give you shit for it. So within
Right.
the patriarchy, men enforce this onto other men, and it creates this. I think it genuinely does get trained into you. I also do think there's an aspect of modern day like access to porn creating a pretty gooner minded Gen
Yeah.
Z male populace, which is not
I
helping.
one of the themes in like pornog I am I don't know your thoughts on this. Like I would like I'm like a Radfem. I would consider myself like mostly anti-pornography. Um I think that like one of the themes is like a expectation of like sexual access to women. And then sort of like if like the sort of things like it's like you have like anybody with any sort of role in in like your life, like like it might be family, it might be like a teacher, it might be a student, and then sort of like if you say like the magic combination of words, they will like immediately like drop their pants and do whatever they want for you. I do sort of agree with you there. Um, but also,
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I think that like as a like if you look at like if do you think like so we live in a so let's say like we create a society, right? Where sort of like every kind of like every woman is sort of like satisfied without like a man. Do you I'm not saying this is like ideal, but like do you think that like every male in the society or which who it like do you think it would be like a class interest of like the males in this society to like find some way to like get like sexual access to women?
I think that it's almost a irrelevant, like an irrelevant idea, right? Because the idea of things like you mentioned certain tropes in porn, like let's say sexy
Sure.
teacher has sex with the male college student or whatever.
Mhm.
I kind of see stuff like that as very similar to certain fetishes, right? Like let's say boyfriend wants the girlfriend to dress up in like a sexy teacher outfit, and she's like, okay, you know.
Okay,
I,
mhm.
uh,
I was sorry.
yeah, I think there's like a difference between fantasies and certain like what those fantasies might indicate about people. Like you don't want to just
Mhm.
assume like if a girl's like super into sort of fictional, somewhat CNC kind of stuff, that means that she likes rape. That's not no, like. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I believe that like the mainstream porn industry where you've got like the
Mhm.
directors, producers, and casters, etc., is very
Yeah.
predatory. I mean, Mia Khalifa's story rings very heavily in my mind right now. But what I
Yeah.
obviously I'm not talking about like the homemade stuff. Like OnlyFans, I think is good as long as models aren't being taken advantage of by those scammy agencies. Stuff like that.
I think most of the top accounts on like OnlyFans are like being like taken advantage
They're
of.
big.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
because the agencies. It's the same with YouTube in the early days. I don't know if you're aware, but there was a big problem with that.
I could imagine. Yeah.
But no, I agree with you on like you're probably more anti-porn than I am. I do think that a
Mhm.
healthy consumption of it, and I think a good example of this, and maybe you'll disagree, is I've seen I mean I'm friends with a fair few sex workers that they do OnlyFans, they do camming and stuff, and like we're like Twitter friends. Some of them follow my social media. And I'll see their following under the replies to their tweets because they're not just like tweeting out
Mhm.
like nudes or links to their OnlyFans. They'll tweet out like just walked my dog, and there'll be a bunch of comments
Mhm.
talking about how cute the dog is and like just basic conversation. And I'm sure all these guys are no doubt gooning to them, but like at the same time, it's like there's an actual level of humanizing happening here. Like these guys aren't just tuning in, jacking off to some random nameless lady they'll never know, never care about. Like there's an actual
Mhm.
like bond and maybe even a level of respect that's formed here. You could also argue there's a parasocial like aspect to
Yeah.
it too, but I don't know. I think even that's like a healthy way, a healthy outlet for some of these guys to not let their like sexual frustrations turn into
Mhm.
an ideological hatred of women because sexual frustration is real. I think that when it
Sure.
becomes so bad that it's you get like incels out of it, I think there's a possibility of porn or sex addiction being at fault, which is real
My
in the same way that dopamine loop addiction is real. You know what I mean?
sure. Well, when I bring that up, my point isn't to say that my point isn't to say that like people are like sexually. My point is to like establish that it's like a class interest to like have some sort of like sexual access. Like if we go through like history or whatever, like I think most of like patriarchy, what the like goal here is, it's to like establish like some sort of like property style ownership, or like some sort of like coercive way in which like a man like is able to like have sex and have children with like a woman.
That's a truth nuke right there. However,
Yeah.
I would also argue that our society has a lot of, especially the further back you go, really creepy, like pedophilic kind of structural laws and customs. Everything from as simple as like your father gives you away at your wedding to, um, you know, girls getting married off to 30-year-olds at 13, like 100 years ago and still to this day. Um, I think that kind of stuff, like it's easy to say this is what like our society has been constructed, or every man is like a pedophile when you look at things like that. But it's like it's more likely that the creepo pedophiles, just like today, run our society and they make our laws. The Jeffrey Epsteins of the world have probably been in control of things for a very long time. They've built the culture and the societies that the people lived under, and the men in those societies were like, okay, I guess if this is the kind of society where women have less rights and no ability to no decision to consent, then all right, this is the society I'm born into. Um, I mean, you'd be shocked at like how normalized very bizarre things were for people living through it at different times in history, because you just don't
Yeah.
really think about it as unusual, you know?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I definitely agree. I okay. I think we've like exhausted. Did you want to bring it back to like trans people?
Yeah, that's a good one actually, because chat wanted me to bring it back to that. I noticed some people were like, "Oh no, are you transphobic?"
I wouldn't consider like I have like a uh, mm, I was gonna say I have trans friends, but I don't want to like go into like this feels like that I have a black friend.
Yeah,
I
no,
wouldn't
I
consider
get it though. Like, I
no,
I
well, I
always feel
think
that way. Yeah, sorry.
yeah. I think that like trans women should be like included in like women's spaces and that sort of thing. I think that there's like I think that a feminist movement should probably like focused on like issues that affects like women as like a sex class, if that makes sense. Um
I get that.
I yeah.
No, I get that. The problem is that so much of misogyny, misogyny is the tool of the patriarchy. So
Mhm.
much of it is they don't care about whether or not you're AFAB or AMAB. If you're a woman, like the misogyny is just there. And I understand that obviously as a trans woman, maybe you don't have to worry about getting pregnant, and then the state says, oh, you've got to carry that to term no matter what. Like you don't have to worry
Mhm.
about those things, but at the same time, like maybe they're lying, but every trans woman I know has become infinitely more feminist and infinitely closer to becoming a Radfem once they transitioned, once they got on hormones and started passing
Mhm.
more. Like they start experiencing life as a woman enough that they typically become very diehard feminists. And like if they end up at the same point as so many cis women through the same experience, it's like I don't know. I feel like the interests are so aligned. Like trans women and cis women have the same interests. They do. Like patriarchy's a threat.
I think that trans women tend to be like very like hardcore feminists, and they tend to be also like hardcore misogynists at like higher rates than the normal population,
Like trans men. Was that what you said?
or trans women too.
Having
Like
a
they
higher rate of misogyny?
like and a higher rate of like being like pro feminist than the normal pop, and like they I think they tend toward like the extremes more and what
Oh,
from what I've seen.
That's probably like that's an area where and this is also I'm at fault for this to a degree because I this is also the lens through which I view a lot of radfems is the internet.
Mhm,
You know, the internet just makes everything look crazier and more radical. So
mhm,
obviously like we have this perception that like every trans woman is like either a like TTT poll poster or whatever or TTT
mhm.
4chan poster or like a giga communist, you know, like that's kind of the
Yeah.
stereotype, right? But like most trans people are probably pretty like just average, you know, like very average politics,
I
average kind of people.
I don't disagree. It's just I think that like the extremes are more like it's not that I think that like everybody is like in an extreme. I just think that the extremes are more represented than like with normal.
Yeah,
With like
like
yeah.
nah, you listen, you don't have to worry. I know you mean cis. Some people
Yeah.
might get iffy about it, but I typically train my audience not to get mad at what someone says and to get mad at what
Mhm.
they mean. You know what I mean? Like if they're gonna get mad.
Sure.
Um, So yeah. But yeah, when it comes to the patriarchy, the system really in what I've seen does not distinguish between cis women and trans women all that much. I
Mhm.
guess the areas where I would agree with you a bit more would be in situations like abuse shelters because I've seen this debate come up a lot and I don't know where I fall on it. Like if a woman's uncomfortable with a trans woman's presence in an abuse shelter should like I feel like there's solutions that are good compromises that keep both people happy, but it's an interesting dilemma, isn't it?
Well,
Sorry, I'll let you go.
I
Yeah.
sure. I'd say on this, like I think probably like there I think that like I don't think it'd be like that hard to have like certain abuse shelters that are like sensitive to that and certain abuse shelters that like aren't like I get in environments that are more like resource scarce
Yeah.
how you might need to like, make like someone uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's where my mind typically like wanders to when I hear a lot of
Mhm,
conversations about like what the interests of women are compared to men or like trans women and trans men, and
mhm,
it's like I guess that's where I see it the most, but I
mhm.
worry because when I saw the left kind of making the most progress, I don't know if you identify as like super left or anything, but I
I wouldn't.
do. Oh, you wouldn't?
Mhm.
Okay. I mean, I
I
identify
mean
as more of
it's
a progressive.
sure. I mean, it's not that I'd consider myself like anti-progressive. It's just that these aren't issues that I are super close to my heart.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just kind of see it all as kind of connected in a sense, like
Mhm,
the same people that are fighting to keep women down. They're the same people fighting to keep trans people down, gay people down, POC down, immigrants out of the country. Like they want to keep like the proletariat slaves of the ruling class. Many of them are seemingly trying to normalize pedophilia now with Donald Trump
right.
and the Epstein files and everything. It's just I want unification between everybody who says all that group that those people that are trying to keep all of us down. We need to unite against them because when we have in
I
the
think
past,
mhm.
sorry,
I just think if you there are like points of contention that don't get brought up between these two groups. I can give like one example that's from like the 80s. Um but like basically there was like a thing in like the New York Pride Parade or something in like the 80s where hmm, like there was basically one of the things was like there was like I okay, I think at like a certain if you French people are weird. There's like a certain point in like history or like where like I think pedophile advocacy was like considered like a progressive thing. Um and this is like like a French thing, I think. You had that like one like French petition for like the age of consent. And like I think it was like during like the like 80s New York Pride Parade. There was like NAMBLA and they wanted to be like included in or they had control over the like advocacy like coalition there. And then sort of like one of the things that sort of they were wanted to, or and then you had like a bunch of like lesbian and like feminist organizations who basically push back on this. Like I'm not like comparing like other groups to this, but there are like scenarios I think that you could like come up with that would like put different like groups in like contact with each other, and like we don't because like generally I think like there are broader political coalitions that like put these people on the same side, but I don't think this is like inherent.
I'm interested to look more into that French story you brought up because, as well
I'd
as the
say the
Pride Parade
French.
in New York. Oh, sorry.
Sure. Like that specific. This isn't French. What I
Okay.
mean, there was like a French petition for like the age of consent. And then sort of like it is around the same period of time and around the same um like ideas of like advocacy and like this type of history, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
Yeah, I'd like to look into that because what it reminds me of is something that I am familiar with that's more recent, which
Mhm.
is the MAP movement. And I remember back in
Yeah.
2016, there was this big push where so-called minor attracted persons were trying
Mhm.
to claim that they were part of the LGBT community with unanimous pushback from the LGBT community.
Well, this has
And it
been going on since the 80s, and
Yeah,
like
pedophiles
I
want
think
want to be advocated
yeah.
for. They're very good at. I actually have a whole rant about the pedophiles online because that's
Mhm.
a whole can of worms that you might get me started on. But
Mhm.
they're really like the map movement thing was really bizarre. And I don't know how much of it was like actual pedophiles trying to weasel their way into the LGBT community with no
Mhm.
acceptance, and how much of it was because at the time we were in a very similar to today massive spike in like anti-progressive, anti-trans, anti-feminist rhetoric. There were
Mhm.
constant narratives and psyops being pushed to try to convince people that um, insert left associated thing had gone too far. And we're seeing a very
Um,
similar resurgence today. I actually just today saw on Twitter some new, I forget what they're calling it. It's a new acronym that is being pushed as like this is the new thing pedophiles are trying to call themselves to be a part of the LGBT community. And the unanimous response is no, we're not letting you in. And it's because pedophiles have organized for a long time. And the internet, they've
yeah.
organized immensely as of late, especially on Twitter. If you tweet something
Mhm.
like lolicon is creepy, prepare prepare for the
Mhm.
onslaught. It's rough.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I do think there's like two different like classes of like pedophiles depending on where they lean politically. Like I think it's more um I think like people on the right are more likely to be like they're probably more numerous and they're more likely to be into like teenagers, if that makes sense. And then you have like people on the left who are like more of like a minority of people who tend to be like attracted to like prepubescent um like people.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't disagree that your examples that you brought up, like they are like instances of like bad things and stuff, but it's
Yeah.
like
I
we don't,
yeah.
at least going off of data, right? Like we go off the data on these
Mhm.
issues, things like, like cis women are more likely to be the victims of sexual assault or assault than cis women,
Yeah.
according to the data. I don't know if it's necessarily true, but the data suggests it is. In the case of like, um, sorry, was that last point you made? My brain blanked a little bit.
I think okay, I think there's a distinction between like pedophiles on the left and the right. I think they're
Uh,
probably more numerous on the right, but I think
yeah,
like
the data would
on the
suggest
right,
that.
yeah, the age preferences are very different.
Ye I haven't really looked into that. I don't know if there's any criminological data that measures that. It would be interesting to know if like
Well,
left-leaning
I mean
pedos
insofar as like
aim
the groups
younger.
that advocate for these things. Like the groups that
Well,
advocate for like pedophilia that are on the left are more like interested in like prepubescent children, and the groups, or I use groups very loosely because like I do think they have more like institutional support, but people on the right who do it are like more interested in like teenagers.
I would say they're more comfortable with openly lusting after
Yeah.
teenagers because they feel
Mhm.
like they can say it's not technically pedophilia and find some way
Well,
to get out of it.
people will talk about the line, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's like it's over the line, that means it's legal." Um, but, like, if you, like, moved it down, they'd be, like, also okay with, like, having, like, sex with, like, a 14 or 15-year-old.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that are like that for sure. I don't really
Yeah.
know where the breakdown would be. Maybe you're right. I'd be curious. I'll look into it. I guess it'll be an unpleasant research session, but I guess I can
It
look
would.
into that.
I do
But
think we're getting a bit off topic.
uh,
Yeah,
oh
sorry.
yeah, we can bring it back. No, no, I think anything that this kind of branches off into is on
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah.
Combos are fun. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess we can bring it around to the trans thing because when I think
I
about, oh sorry,
mhm.
sorry. I guess this will
Uh
be like my. I'll let you go first. Sorry.
I think a more salient example of, like, ways that, like, men and or, like, different groups in, like, the progressive spectrum can come into contact, like, um, I think, like, women and, like, gay guys, I think, it's, like, I don't I would if I said gay guys have, like, a lot of institutional power, would you agree or disagree with that?
Gay men compared to other members of like the LGBT community, I would say
Yeah.
probably hold like if you're a white gay man who's like coming from
Uh,
wealth, especially like you've got a
mhm,
lot of things going for you that can effectively negate
sure.
any disadvantage you have. But that's when it comes just to your average like gay man who's like white, probably not
Mhm.
by that much. Probably not by that much unless they're totally in the closet and don't live as themselves publicly. Like
A
if
lot
you can
of
always just yeah, sorry.
I've had, like, a lot of, like, arguments with, like, gay guys who have been, like, very overtly, like, misogynistic. I have, like, a lot of conversations with, like, people I guess, like, I think I get along with, like, femme gays more than, like,
More
you're,
masked.
like, more straight. Yeah, or, like, straight passing, like, gay guys. Like, these are, like, 2 like, you could, like, construct a specific gay guy that would probably, like, have interests that are, like, at you could construct, like, a cishet woman who or, like, even, like, a queer woman, who would probably have, like, interests that come at the expense of, like, other people or, like, other minority groups, and I think the reason we don't express this more, is because, like, we exist in, like, a broader political coalition with other minority groups, so I don't think this is, like, a given.
Yeah, it's like I guess to my main like thesis to all
Mhm,
of my position on this is that in the past there have been cases where the best interests of a group have been
mhm,
used to argue why we need to stay regressive in some area. And so like
sure,
a good example that like when I heard it when I was younger, it really like stuck with me for some reason. I guess it just surprised
mhm,
me because when I was younger and a little bit more naive, I always saw that like I had this perception that women were always more progressive than men, and I'm sure that's always been true to an extent, but
mhm.
at the same time, I overestimated it a lot and I had this
Mhm.
perception that like in the civil rights era, like you were really likely to meet like a white woman who was sympathetic to the plight of people of color, when in reality
Uh,
there were like, sorry,
Go ahead.
yeah, there was like large pushback from like from like women's groups. I wouldn't even call them feminist, but women's groups that were like they argued that the presence of black women using the same bathrooms or water fountains as them, or sitting next to them on the bus or anything like that was a threat
Mhm,
to their safety or to their comfort. And racist white men were all too happy to oblige because they feel sexually threatened, particularly by black men. But even if their wives are feeling, or their wives, daughters, whatever, women in general, white women feel
mhm,
threatened by black people's presence, they'll happily oblige on the grounds of race, not because they
mhm.
like women, but It's
Sure.
been worrying how that could be weaponized.
I I don't so I'd say the primary goal. I wouldn't characterize this as like some. I do think I have like a better example in mind, but I would say I think like this is like a racism. I wouldn't say this is like like a thing that like materially like advances women's interests. I do. There are other things that I had in mind that I think would be sort of like better examples. If you look at like um, and these are also like I think like thing arguments that I'm sympathetic towards. But if you look at like early suffragette history, um, sort of like one of the things that happened was specifically the black vote and like women's suffrage were supposed to be like bundled together, in the whichever number of that bill was. Um, And one of the things that ended up happening was the specifically the African American vote that got implemented, and then it took like around like 50 years before like women had the political capital to do that. And there was like a lot of like bitterness because women like the political capital didn't exist for like women on their own to get voting rights. And I like people like to say like, oh, like they're being racist here. But like I think this is like a legitimate example of like when like women are being like backstabbed here. Because
I
like
s-
they coalitioned together, they advocated together, and like they were like left out of like the final draft.
for sure, and I understand where the frustration comes from, but
Mm.
I'd like to point out who got it the worst there. Black women. When like
Yeah,
white like black women got it the absolute worst when white women decided they didn't want to build a coalition with black women, when they didn't want to use the same water fountain or the same bathroom. I understand where the bitterness may come from, but it
sure.
sucks
I'm not
because
defending
know,
like
like,
that because that was I'm not defending that to be clear.
no,
That
I
was in
get
like
you,
the
I get you.
60s. I
Yeah.
like I brought up the suffer. I think that's like an example. I think would be more like sympathetic to me.
I get that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Things have always been messy. That's the thing. Like, it's very hindsight's always 2020, and so that's why it's so
Mhm.
easy. Like, if you once you start looking into the history of civil rights movements, it's like,
Mhm.
wow, it's a very concise story that leads to today, huh? There's no like
Yeah,
breaks or chapter or time skips or anything. It's all um very gradual
messy.
to
Yeah.
getting us here. And we won't always know what the best choice is at the time. Like, as a
Mhm.
movement we might make massive follies. I think the leftist movement right now is in a state of enormous folly. That doesn't mean I
Sure.
necessarily give up on the leftist movement, and I don't think it's permanent. I do think progress will be made. I think patriarchy will continue to crumble, especially as more
Mhm.
men realize that it's not that great to be a man in patriarchy, especially what I like to call late stage patriarchy, which we're in right now. I think
Sure.
I think a lot of these systems that we fight against are inevitably doomed. It's just we have our infighting, we have our disagreements, and we have our bumps in the road, but we're gonna win in
Mhm.
the end. You know, we're gonna make the world better.
I a lot of the things I see, and I'm a bit doomer on this. Like, I think we live in like a society with a very weak patriarchy where like men like we live in a male dominated society, but sort of like the coercive power that like your average man has is like very like lost and reduced. Um so I think we're either going to go in a direction where this is like strengthened, or we're going to go in like a direction where this is like done away with. Um if that makes sense.
I get that. The doomer perspective is understandable, like, or the more doomerish perspective is understandable, but maybe I'm a little bit naive. I've been trying to stay optimistic, because I don't know. People like to appreciate that I'm not super doomer, at least in my audience. So I try not to feed too
Sure.
much into the doomer state of things. But I absolutely won't deny that right now, like, men and women are it feels like are at each other's throats and can't relate on anything, and don't seem like, it feels like they don't have the same interests. But maybe I'm the
Mhm.
crazy one for thinking that we do. like we do have the same interests, and it feels like the patriarchy is psyoping us. I do you know what the word psyop means?
I do.
Yeah, it feels like the patriarchy or those that uphold it are psyoping us into this idea that like women should be separate or unique in their self-advocacy from other groups when it feels as though the most progress has been made, and I might be wrong, but it seems like the most progress has been made when we've had intersectionality on top.
Mm.
Like I could be wrong, but it that's kind of where
Well,
I've fallen. you know
Well, I think this is like a fantasy that we have. I do think there is benefit to working with other groups, but I think this is like an individual thing. Like if we look, like I brought up the suffragette example where they did coalition with like Black civil rights groups, and this is something that didn't pan out. And they're kind of left with nothing until like 50 years later. One thing I do
well,
think happened was prohibition and women's rights were really this was like 50 years after that, but this they were like really they worked like hand in hand. I'd even like go to say that like women got the right to vote because of prohibition. um Before that you kind of had it where most women I think were really like conservative because they, very like religious. But most like advocates for like women's rights were more progressive. And so neither party really like saw any benefit in like giving women the right to vote until prohibition. I think we like look to the past with like rose tinted glasses that this is like everybody is like working together to, advance themselves.
not really, because like in the past we definitely weren't working together as much. Like there were
Mhm.
cases of intersectionality, but
Yeah.
I mean, in more modern history, like more recently than the 1960s, we had like the 1970s and 80s, where we know for
Mhm.
a fact that like leftist organization was like actively psyoped by the CIA and the FBI,
Yeah.
and the black community in that era was also specifically fucked by the FBI because we were making progress. Like the unification
Right.
of progressive ideology was making progress, and the feds were like, we got to stop this. Oh my god, we got to
Mhm.
stop this. So they started churning out that crack. They started psyoping the left and the right. They got that McCarthyist era going. Like
Mhm.
they locked shit down when they realized what intersectionality would do to their
Yeah.
constructed, chauvinist systems. I get that there's been places where it's fucked up in the past. Like another example that's similar to what you brought up is the Stonewall movement, I believe it was called, where
Yeah.
trans women were famously like trying to be a part of that, were trying to be advocated for, and did do a lot of advocating for lesbians and gays and bisexuals in that movement, but
Mhm.
were largely left behind by the other end of the group because trans people were seen as a little too hard to get the normies on board with, basically.
Mhm.
And so they were kind of left behind in the same way that a lot of like black civil rights groups kind of left white women and black women behind when it came to
Right.
voter advocacy. So it's never been perfect. It'll probably never be perfect, but like, perfection is the enemy of good enough. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I do think that good enough is the enemy of better. So
Sure. Yeah. I um yeah. I guess we could bring this back to like trans women. I think that a lot of like you sort of brought this up that a lot of like trans women have like interests that are like aligned with like women's interests. Um and like I do sort of I am like I do agree with like I do think this is good, and like I do think it's like good to like include them and like these sorts of like women's advocacy and like women's spaces. I just I think that like as a like movement we should be like focused on improving like be inclusive but not like sort of like going off on like all these different types of like um things that are out of scope, if that makes sense.
yeah, I guess I can see the value in the idea of if you can get conservative women on board with feminism through a more restrained form of it, where it's like, okay, if advocating for women, but you don't need to be a giga intersectional progressive. Like, it's always good to
Mhm.
have numbers, but at the end of the day, I think the goal, like from there, should be to try to warm them up to broader, like progressive,
Sure.
like when I say progressive, I mean not like feminism is a progressive ideology. I think that's undeniable. Would you agree?
Um, I think that feminism is kind of broad in its scope. There's a bunch of different ways you can like contort it.
um I'll let you elaborate on that. I'm curious what you mean by
Sure.
that.
I think like there's different ideas for how to pursue women's interests. For me, it would be like materially sort of advancing women's interests. I think this is like I think it's often progressive, but I don't think it necessarily is. A lot of the like anti-pornography advocacy is like done on the right.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people would consider this like anti-progressive, but I do think it's something that's like pro-women and materially
Mm.
advances women's interests.
Well, the right's form of like anti-porn is the shoe on head image where it says unsolicited opinions from online prostitutes. I wouldn't exactly say it's good for
Sure,
women.
I think the way I do think they're disgusting in like their views. But like the specific outcomes like people are trying to like uh get to um I think are like positive.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I guess the main issue is that it's easy to say, oh, these guys, we have the same end goal on this issue, so we should we should unite. Um, but I've often found that, like, if you're allying with people in any way that don't hold the same fundamental ideals as you, and what I mean by
Mhm.
that is like if you are trying to coalition build with someone who doesn't fundamentally believe in the idea of freedom, for instance, like as a concept, it's like it might be really difficult when you start to like broach certain issues because you might find pretty serious schisms. Like a racist white conservative woman, it might not be willing to join the feminist movement if feminists are willing to advocate for women of color at all. Like women of color might need to be
I don't think
excluded for
these
that.
people need to be like incorporated into like an actual like
Yeah.
activism thing. I just
Okay.
think like they need to be, in order to like solve certain issues, need to be able to because like I feel like the left will and like if you go I don't have any specific examples of this, but like if you go to like certain like European countries, like leftist parties will like agree with like right-wing parties on certain things. And like I don't people don't super care when it's
Slopulism.
like yeah, people don't care super care when it's like the left that's doing it, but like if it's like women, if it's for women, it's like the biggest deal on the planet.
I might have some bias there. I could be like exercising some kind of internalized misogyny that makes me see this as an especially big problem. I'm open to that
Mhm,
idea. Um, I guess the way that I see it is, maybe I'm kind of sounding a bit like a broken record, but I
mhm.
it's hard for me to see women's rights and the advocacy for women and their interests, so to speak, as separate from politics. It feels so ingrained in politics on a policy and more importantly a
Mhm.
social level. I feel like
I
especially lately we've seen Roe v. Wade get struck down, which was a massive
didn't
massive
say this was
upset.
apolitical.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I might have misunderstood you. My bad. But
Sure.
like
Okay. Go ahead.
it, feminism, or I guess women's advocacy, feels innately progressive to me because it is
Mhm.
always the right that is trying to do things like remove Roe v. Wade. They're always trying to do
Right.
things like crack down on systems like free diapers for mothers, or like maternity leave, or you could go down the list of issues like legal binding protections or laws for like allowing women to have like accommodations or equal rights to men. It's like it's always the right that's fighting against it. it's always the conservatives that are fighting against it. Like the right has deemed feminism the enemy. It's the great Satan in their eyes. And it's like, man, as a feminist, you know what? I see conservatives as the great Satan, you know? And it's weird though when I meet someone who's like, I'm advocating for like women, but I don't really care about the right versus left thing. It's like, huh, interesting.
Well, I mean, I think this is because the right's in power. There are certain things on the left that I'd take issue with that they advocate for. Like I've mentioned like pornography like a billion times. I in specific my specific issue is like the way it's produced, like the types of like harms that like come out of it. I think a lot of the ways that like leftist guys will like talk about women, it like belies some kind of like, there is like a quote. It gets like it gets like loosely summarized to mean like the right views like women as like private property, and like on the left it's like public property. Um, like there is like I think like a view of like if I like I've spoken to people who've like wanted like state-run brothels, and like that sort of thing. I think these are like exam and also sort of like specifically like leftist means to like alleviate like to protect like men's sexual access to women. Like I don't think leftist men like stop being misogynist.
That's true. Like there's an aspect of like internalized misogyny that you'll see
Mhm.
that's pretty common on the left. Like I think I don't know if you're a fan of him, but Hassan Piker I think is a good example. Like very commonly, he just his like go-to insults will be like "suck my dick," you know, like to women
Yeah.
that are insulting.
Well,
Like there's
is
there's
it
been a lot of
internalized misogyny if he's male?
in a way I think it is because he probably
Mhm.
doesn't believe he's misogynistic. I think he thinks he's the most feminist in the world, and that it's made him blind to his faults or like the areas where he's maybe still a little bit frat bro. Like he was like a really like
Mhm.
weird like frat bro womanizer back in the day.
Would would like a conservative man who like a religious conservative man who like said it's like good for women to be like subservient, would this be like an like internally misogynistic because they're like think that they're advocating for women?
Um like these guys yeah, I'd say they don't realize they have this misogyny internalized in the same way
Yeah,
that a lot of women don't realize that they've internalized misogyny. It's
yeah,
the way I think of internalized misogyny is less that it's like women not realizing that they are applying misogynistic standards to themselves, and it's more that like when people are misogynistic or think with misogynistic lenses but that they don't even realize it's been so normalized to them, they grew up in a society where it's so normal that even once they're like
Mhm.
giga progressive and woke, they don't realize how much of the way they see the world is through a patriarchal lens.
Okay. I think we'd probably use these terms like differently. Um
Okay, that's
like
fair.
in my mind it's like specifically like viewpoints that like affect the self that like you believe about yourself. um if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Going back to it though, like leftist men are definitely not immune to that, right? Like being misogynistic still, or having like views that are effectively still anti-women, even if it's like on its face they seem progressive. I think a
I
lot of
think
that's
they're
just the fact.
structurally still I think that they're structurally still misogynistic. In like the positions that they advocate for are necessarily or like I okay, there are like a lot more women on the left, so I think like the left is probably going to be more like feminist just because like more women gravitate to these ideas, but I think like the types of like is still structurally more misogynist. Um
That's fair. I mean, like the way I see it is that sorry, give me a moment. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was just checking something. Yeah,
mhm.
as I was saying, the way I see it, I get the vibe that there's a perception that leftist men are just advocating for a list of progressive issues, mostly to do with like reform around like the systems that we live under. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like woke woke
Mhm.
still it's woke misogyny is a good way of putting it, I guess, is the perception. And I definitely do think those problems are still prevalent, mostly just because the left has more men in it now. Like there are definitely like men can't just magically like snap away all that internalized or taught
Mhm.
misogyny or taught worldview by the patriarchy. It takes work,
Mhm.
and I hate everyone hates that phrase, but it's true. It takes work, it takes time. My main thing I try to do here is like bring those people over if I can reach them, and
Mhm.
like it's not perfect, but like I guess where I stand is that like I see all of these as trickling down from the same issues of like conservative worldview, and
Right.
you more so see it as unique, I guess, or a separate issue.
Sure. If we ask like what makes a conservative, it's going to be like a collection of different ideas, um, that aren't necessary. Like we draw a box around it and call it like conservative because this is how like different groups have like um I just does that make sense? Like it's how different groups have like learned to like advocate for these positions. Like even if you look in the right, there's like different like group like you might have someone who's like more of like single issue voters, they might be like a libertarian, they might be like they're different ideas that like get boxed together.
Yeah, there's definitely and the left is the same way. It's we've just
Yeah,
got we fight a lot. Like right now, I'm generally fighting with like authoritarian type lefties, not necessarily
right.
because they're authoritarian, but because they tend to get really mad at me for being pro Ukraine. Um,
So,
so that tends to result in the occasional outburst or disagreement between parties,
mhm,
but like yeah, like you'll never see full unity that like, and I don't necessarily think you should want to unite with people who have like really bad irreconcilable differences. Like I don't get along
yeah.
with Hassan. I can't coalition build with Hassan or his community because like
Mhm,
there are just issues where he is beyond the pale bad on. You know what I mean? And so
yeah.
I don't think you need to ally with people like that at all. No, I wouldn't advise that like feminists in general ally with people on the left that are like that. And I kind of think
Mhm,
that we need more feminists on the left to be the police of that kind of thing. Like it is valuable to have feminists who are like, hey, you're a misogynist, and to call it out when they
mhm.
see it. Like it's valuable. Like the left needs it. Like I do think that unity is good, but also a little bit of self-policing is good too.
Sure. Okay. Um I think we could go back to like uh so transphobia. Is there anything that we haven't like resolved for that? I guess I would say I do have like a take that might cause like a bit more um like disagreement maybe. I think that like I guess my view of this, I think I don't like I think that people like transition for like a variety of different like sort of reasons that like get like boxed together. But I think like the specific point is like this is like a physical thing that like changes and it's different for me. I think that for like I think there's like an issue where like a lot of like there's like a lot of resistance. I shouldn't say a lot of it. I think that there's like some sort of like disconnect like prevents people like if you're like I do hold women or like cis women to like a high standard too, but it's like specifically for like women's spaces like the belief of being um like accepted unconditionally without being like asked to like fit in some way. I wanted I guess this might be like a bit more like contentious point for us. Um
Yeah, that's fine. Like the way that I see it, a lot of
mhm,
people are not very informed on trans stuff because, and it
sure.
makes sense because it's a little bit esoteric. There's a
Mhm,
surprising amount of research both in the world of sociology, biology, and psychiatry,
mhm,
like everything to do with mental health and whatnot, that goes into the study of gender dysphoria, gender
sure.
identity, And even historians, if we really want to touch on it, going back into the history of gender identity and how it's existed in the past for people, um,
Right.
our modern conceptions of sex and gender are quite
Mhm.
modern, and they
I
are relatively
mhm,
colloquial. I've always been bad at that word.
mhm. Look,
The most modern standard in the scientific community is a pretty strong consensus of support for trans people.
Mhm.
Obviously, when it comes to like, should trans women have to like pass a certain amount or behave a certain way to be accepted in women's spaces, I feel like we don't even have that conversation about cis women. Like, if you're asking
I
that question, it kind of, uh,
I'm open to this conversation about cis women. But
okay.
yeah, I understand.
It doesn't really seem though that the conversation gets brought up often when it's like,
Mhm.
should this should insert kind of cis woman, I guess, be allowed in women's spaces? Like, you don't really see that argument come up very often because the assumption is, yeah, insert cis woman should probably be welcome to a woman's space unless there's something she's done that is, the thing you have a problem with is that thing, not the fact that she's a woman. That's why she's excluded. But when we bring up like, what standards do trans women have to meet to reach that same level of neutrality as just a cis woman
Mhm.
entering a woman's
I don't
space?
I don't do
It
I
can,
don't do this based on, like, passing or, like, any of that. Like, for me, it's, like, strict like, what are your views? Mm,
yeah, like
yeah.
the interesting. Oh, sorry. Do you want to repeat? You cut out a little bit on my end.
Sure. For I don't really do this. I'm like, do you like look a certain way, or like do you have these sort of like arbitrary um person? Well, I shouldn't even. No, for me, it's like not like do you like look a certain way. It's like how do you like interact with certain people? How do you like what views do you hold? If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like
and
I
I
wouldn't
and
want. Yeah.
yeah, sorry about that. And in this case, it would be similar to the leftist men thing, right? Where it's less that you have a problem with like trans women, and it's more that you got a problem with certain like behaviors or certain like ideas, and you might see them be more prevalent with trans women or trans men. Which is fair. Sometimes that's bound to happen. Trans women might be a little more prone to internalize misogyny, or probably are, than most. Uh, but I feel like it's the conversation of like trans women. It's like I guess it feels like there is an othering, like a mental partition between cis women and trans women that goes deeper than just um like an acceptance that they transitioned. You know what I mean? Like there's sort of like a hard line you might have constructed. And I guess that's where I've always had the biggest worry about radical feminism and trans advocacy, is where it feels like there's an internalized division, a partition between cis and trans women that's just really hard to break down. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, 'cause in, like, my mind, right, a trans woman is probably gonna have, like, some issues that probably affect cis women that, like, they don't have to deal with. A trans woman is also probably gonna have, like, their own issues that, like, they have to deal with as a class that, like, cis women don't have to deal with. Um, like, I think this is, like, a thing that exists, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. We could probably agree to disagree on most of these issues. I'd be curious to have you on in the future because we have been going for an hour and a half now, and it's going to be
Okay,
quite something to edit this one up. So I probably do want to start winding things down. But if you ever want to
okay,
come on again for more like follow up conversations, I'm absolutely down.
definitely. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I do think my friend also wanted to like come on. This would be more like an argument debate. Maybe
Okay.
next time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably
I'll
next time because we've been going for a bit now.
Great, thank you so much.
No problem. It's been nice having you on. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem. I'll see ya.
See ya, see ya. I'd say that was a pretty good convo. We didn't agree on everything, but like I said, I've been trying to get more like combos going, and I always match people's energy. So if you're mad that I'm not screaming or getting angry with people, okay, come on, calm down. All right, be normal. But I think that was pretty good. I think that was pretty darn good. What'd you guys think? That was a fun convo for me. I've not gotten to have like a one-on-one convo with like a self-identifying Radfem before, so that was pretty cool. Preventative care for gender dysphoria is being capriciously banned in many places to biochemically mutilate us. True. Interesting and fascinating. Just got a Ted Cruz ad. Nice combo. Yeah, it was a solid combo. I was behind. Oh no, Lucky Otter. I'm glad you guys liked it. I'm glad you guys liked it. If you enjoyed watching, then consider leaving a like and a comment down below. Subscribe and ring the bell icon, and follow my social medias linked down below. Hopefully you'll see more of me in the future.
Welcome to capitalism, my dude.
Hey!
Chibi reviews attacking of Tuber for not wanting an SFW of her character. Chibi, the guy who defends Lolicon, then got mad when that Tuber called him that guy who fiancé cheated on and then left him.
Eshan, thank you for the $10, and all of that is true. I will be covering all of that later in the stream. Don't worry. That was a longer conversation than I was expecting it to be, but I had a great time. Time flies. Time flies when you're having fun. Thank you for coming on. And let me know in the comments if you want more debates. Thank you for watching.